I'm really happy that you accepted the invite to participate in our podcast series. So we've met quite a few years ago, right? When I was consulting for a company you've been working for. You were vice president of product, and so you've been in this domain for quite a while. You've been doing product, and I think it's an amazing story, and I'm dying to know more about your experiences and about some of the amazing companies you worked for, some of the amazing projects you worked for as well. I'm sure everyone will want to listen to hear more about this. So tell me a bit about how you ended up here and how you ended up doing product.
Yeah, well, thank you so much. Quite a generous introduction. So, yeah, I've been in this industry. Actually, I calculated 25 years, over 25 years. So, I actually have a technical background. My degree is not in business, it's in computer engineering, not even computer science. So, about, 25 years, I started networking and operating systems. So, my first job out of college was actually with Hewlett Packard, working on IPv6 and TCP/IP protocols back for HPUX. And thankfully nowadays we don't even need to think about, those networking protocols because, the system takes care of for us automatically. But back then it wasn't the case. So I spent several years at HP, and then afterwards I started to shift up. So I started to shift up the application layer, and my next job was with Intel. I worked on the wearable platform, head worn, wrist worn. A lot of you have Apple Watch now. Back then, it wasn't the case. So Intel was trying to break into the wearable platform, and I worked on mobile apps. And that's when I started to realize that I'm more interested in what I'm building than how I'm building. So while I still was very passionate around the technology, and in my case, I was working on a mobile platform. My passion was more with product and design. So I took those learnings to my next company, which is Amazon. And at Amazon, I was kind of like thrown right in. And I worked on streaming video devices on Alexa enabled platforms. So, of course, the number one video streaming experience on Amazon devices, as you can imagine, are Netflix and YouTube. And I worked on YouTube. So at the time, Amazon was Echo show. Echo just came up. Echo that was just using the voice utterances. But at the time, Amazon was coming up with video-enabled devices. Think of anything with a screen. And the idea was to bring YouTube enabled through your text speech. So I was at Amazon a very long period of time, but I got to work on a pretty fascinating experience of enabling YouTube and also working very closely both with Google and YouTube, because at the time there was a little bit of contention between the companies. So I
Mm.
worked with the leadership team at Amazon to make sure that the very same customer, remember the person is the same. You can have Amazon devices and Google devices to make sure they have nice continuous experience. So after Amazon, I moved to a very different domain. I went to InsurTech, and the company was called RMS. It was later acquired by Moody's Analytics. So bigger company. And this is where I learned to work on, a suite of applications. I had a pretty expansive team, close to 200 people. And in a very short period of time, we took this kind of like very, I want to say like traditional, but more on-prem company and transformed it into a true SaaS business. So that's where my passion for product really reinstated. Then after that, I again switched gears and went into very data focused domain. And this is where you and I met, of course. And I worked on external data integration platform that helps people extract data from various external sources and bring them into your warehouses so you can derive unplanned analytics. So throughout all these, different career opportunities and events, I really kind of was very clear in my mind that, I was a good engineer, but of course there are people far more talented than me, and it was very clear for me. But what I really, thrive on is trying to identify very focused use case for innovation and solve problems, in innovative ways that also serve the company you're working for. And that's what my passion is, and that's what I'm focusing right now.
Wow, that's amazing. But I have a small curiosity. How is it like to work for a company like Amazon on such an important project? I mean, Alexa is, well, at that time, and maybe it still is, but at that time it was, along with the other devices from other competitors, it was like the core product, something revolutionary.
Well, thank you. Well, actually, a lot of what I know and what I do best, I have to give credit to Amazon. So, first of all, it's a very unique company compared to any other company. So, you probably have entered many enterprises that have a mission and have a vision and have cultural values, but Amazon has leadership principles. You can, pull them up. There's around 14 of them now. And for example, number one is customer obsession, right? Then there's, um, you know, uh, it's all about digital innovation. So basically, invent and simplify is another leadership principle. It's also a frugal company. So you have to make sure that you're managing resources in a responsible way, right? So it's also about building trust cross-functional and with other teams. So it really lives and breathes those leadership principles that were established by the L team, the leadership team, back when the company was formed. And all these years later, it's still there. It's still true. So if you were to go and you were to say, well, in the spirit of customer obsession, people will know exactly what you're talking about. You're representing the customer. Right. If you were to go and say, like, well, I want to invent and simplify, you knew what you're talking about. You're talking about some kind of innovation and doing things in a modern way. So it really encompasses those leadership principles. And as a result, you have a lot of people. When I was at Amazon was 500,000 employees. Now it's over 1 million, of course, but all these people actually live and breathe the same values and they move in the same direction. I think that's what helps Amazon really stay on top and just be so disruptive and innovative and do it in a good, creative way. So the opportunity that was presented for me is, I'll tell you a story. We launched Echo Show, and we were using public APIs of YouTube, completely legitimate way. It's there's a public API. After a certain number of utterances, you start pay as you go. But that's what Amazon was doing to enable YouTube experiences. But at the time, also, again, this was 2018. Google devices were actually not sold on the Amazon store. So in the Amazon marketplace, Amazon was not selling Google devices because at the time, the two companies were not really working hand in hand. So when Google detected that YouTube APIs are used to enhance Amazon devices, but at the same time, that same, opportunity is not presented for Google, they just stopped support of the API. So all of a sudden, all of your YouTube utterances stopped working. And this was around September timeframe. So just months going into Christmas. So as you can imagine, the sales stopped. They started falling. The satisfaction score started falling as well. And this was a very big hit, both for Amazon as a company, but more importantly for the customers that were relying on that experience. So a lot of actually very happy customers using that product. And this was very interesting to watch. I worked with the leadership team at Amazon directly. We also had, interactions through the legal team with, Susan Wachitsky on the YouTube side. There was a lot of communication with Google, and we were using those Amazon leadership principles I talked to you about to kind of navigate how we want to keep this conversation going. So several things we were looking at. So first of all, we wanted to restore the experience. So in the spirit of customer obsession, it was the same people. Same people use Amazon when you buy something here in the United States. Same people use Google when you search something, right? So we wanted to preserve it, the experience is good and the customer is not hit in the midst of it, right? We also were thinking about both short-term and long-term. Short-term, we wanted to restore the experience, but more importantly, we wanted to make sure there's long-term innovation And I'll tell you in a second how actually this transformed the whole video experience across the entire Amazon platform. So short term, we partnered with Microsoft, and we actually used Bing search to find, the YouTube and play YouTube through basically the Bing search. But long term, we continued partnering with Google, and actually within less than 2 months, the experience was restored and it went back to the original YouTube API experience. So the idea was always to do it both short term, but without losing sight of the long term. It was literally from September to December, and in less than 3-4 months, we were able to restore it, restore the relationship between the companies, and also make sure that long-term innovation, not just for YouTube, but also for Netflix and other providers, like things like events, like live events, like Thursday Night Football, it all actually came from that same initiative. So very interesting. It was great to see and pretty humbling.
It's quite an amazing experience, and I love this concept with short term and long term, and maybe we can come back a bit later on that. But in your career, from what I've seen, you've managed big projects with, in general, with a lot of people, with a lot of expectations from stakeholders. Um, and I was wondering, and you were talking also about leadership. I was wondering, um, what's a true product leader? What defines a great product leader?
Well, right now, I would say, especially with the age of AI, product discipline is really being transformed. But I think, the roots of it are not going to change too much. So to me, and again, this is very my answer, this is my personal answer. And I do like to hear opinions from, others in the industry, whether it's, you listen to Marty Kagan or Lenny Rachinsky, podcast that is full of fantastic PM leaders. But when I think of it as what is a good, product lead and product mindset, I actually think of it as like intersection of 4 different quadrants. So there's, of course, the product quadrant. Are you building the right product? This is where ability to know the market, where you're playing, making sure you know the trends, the domain, you deeply know the customer and their pain points. You understand, what are the strategic opportunities, blue ocean opportunities versus something that's already been tried and, maybe it's not, the best place, to break through. So the right product mindset, and this is where your vision, your ability to think ahead is really, really important. And then, of course, there's the right process. Even if you have the best vision, you have to execute. So I actually, to me, the best influences in my career that I've watched is they can go and basically juxtapose these quite opposite skills. On one hand, they can think very, you know, uh, in the future, opportunistically, but also they can be very, short-term focused, very realistic, and they can take those abstract terms and bring them into very concrete, details that everybody around you can understand. So ability to execute is really important. So right product meets right process. So this is where you can take an abstract concept, break down those ideas into something very specific. You can test it. This whole concept of MVP that's been, everybody talks about it, but it's really, not so much minimum viable product. It's more like how can you bring enough value to hook interest in the market and start, putting yourself out there so you can start learning and really innovating and really building something that's functional and usable and also viable and sellable, right? You have to be a good writer. If you're in a smaller company, you can, explain things by word of mouth, but in a bigger company, you have to be a good writer. So I think that's very important as well. And it's not so much about what's your preferred method of communication, it's you're working with a team. Some people are visual learners, some people are auditory learners. So you have to be able to explain things and convey things in a different form, right? And also you have to be data driven. Strategic decisions are best when they're backed by data. Doesn't mean you're very literal about it, but you need to be data informed to make those decisions. So again, we talked about right product, we talked about right process, Of course, there's the right people. So that's a third, I think, very important quadrant of good product mindset is you need to be able to work with different people. So I like the saying that, a product manager is master of none and a server of all, meaning that a lot of times engineering doesn't report to you. Different people that are on the delivery spectrum, they don't report to you. So you really have to influence them through, not through authority, but influence them through your leadership and passion and bring that excitement into the team. You also, like I said, have to be very, tactical. So, you're an agile leader and an agile expert, and you're better, actually in a better position to explain and say how much is important for everybody to understand the why and what we're building, but also make sure that the PM is there in the trenches to guide the delivery team along the way, right? And just really working on the edges. I actually really like when a PM can work on the edges, meaning either more technical or
Mm.
also work with the go-to-market team and marketing. PM is not just the one only focusing on product. You have to work very collaboratively and cross-functional, you know. And for example, when we launch a product, your go-to-market process involves training support, training the sales, making sure you give them objections handling, creating a lot of collateral for marketing, right? Writing blogs. So all of that is part of enabling your delivery team to make sure they're successful in their job, right? And then the last quadrant is the culture. So everybody wants to innovate, but that's hard. Right. So I think the PM's job is really important to be, that passionate and also very pragmatic person that always reminds the team why we're building it, what is actually the pain points of the user, and bringing in the culture. You mentioned that, I do have a high standard, but I also try to do it by elevating others. And I think that's very important. And also being humble in what you do and making sure you let other people shine in their discipline, whatever that discipline might be, right? So, right culture involves, making sure you operate with the founder mentality. A lot of times, if you have to wonder whose job it is, usually the answer is it's yours. So, as a product manager, we do have to pick up a lot of loose balls that are flying from all direction. You also have to lead with context, not control. Again, everybody's job is hard. So as a PM, you have to empathize and enable them to do their job. And a lot of times, if things are not coming through, it's probably because people don't have enough context, and making sure those learnings that we PMs have, whether it's directly from the market or the customers, they proliferate throughout the org, right? And also, again, raising the bar. That's actually one of the, Amazon leadership principles I kind of took with me is you always raise the bar. You yourself have to learn from others, but also you have to create this common understanding is what is good, what is quality. Quality is just agreement on a standard. So when you're launching a product, when you agree with your engineering and R&D team around what is, acceptance quality criteria for your launch, for example, and that will change when you're launching a product 0 to 1 versus mature product release, right? But making sure that shared understanding is built throughout. So I would say between right products, right process, right people, right culture, that's where you kind of have to navigate. And, again, you rely on other people. PM is a very team sports, discipline. So you do have to rely on others to make sure you launch innovative products, and you basically learn along the way.
And I will pick maybe some or some one or two terms you used, um, because well, like in any domain and in any leadership direction, there are a lot of elements in the ecosystem. But you mentioned passion, and I think that's really important because that makes people, gives people energy. Actually, even when maybe they're down, even when they don't see the end of the tunnel, that passion that comes from their leader, it's driving them. Then you said context, and that also impressed me in a way, because context, there are a lot of people that are holding management position sometimes forget how important context is. So that by giving context, you basically give also some autonomy to people, because if they understand the global picture, then they have the ability to go the extra mile in the right direction to solve the problem. And also, it was something that actually resonated with me, related to you said knowing how to write things, be a good writer. And I think we're not talking about that enough. But I think it's so important, because that actually puts the needle into an amazing functional leadership, the ability of translating vision into common language. And I don't know what are your thoughts on this, of being a good writer.
I mean, if you were, to like look at the human level, how do we learn? Right? We learn by watching, by listening, by writing, and then by doing. Right? So I think the way I look at it is, as a PM, you really rely on other people. Like my last company, we had just one designer, and he was in Ukraine, and it's a US based company. Um, at at RMS, we had a team. I want to say around 14 designers, right? So you have very few resources that you have to allocate. So whether it's one product, one designer, in my experience, when we do a kickoff of a new feature or a new product, when people have some artifact to review before they go in, and they come in informed, we have a much better discussion than if somebody was to go and just talk and explain things, but it may not, persist, and it's not going to give them an opportunity to ask really good questions. I learned my writing, frankly, and again, this is something I had to learn. I'm not a good writer just, out of the crib. So I learned it at Amazon. So everybody heard of PRFAQs, and they really actually very strict around that. One first page is your press release when you're launching. What would it say? Right. And then next 5 pages are your FAQs, down from, what's the competition like, to how you're going to technically enable it, to what are your success metrics. So I kind of, over my years and adapting it to different companies. Again, at the time Amazon was 500,000 people, Invite was 3,000 people, RMS was 1,000 people. My latest startup was less than 100 people. So you adapt. I actually like the concept of a product brief. It still kind of has that narrative, but it also explains who is your customer? What problem are you solving? What is their digital experience? What is the technical capabilities to enable it? What are the edge cases? What are success metrics? And right now, it's almost like there's no excuse not to do it. Claire Bow, who is actually CPTO of the Launch Darkly, she created a tool called Chat PRD, which can give you, a PRD using a template literally in seconds. And, right now PMs have pretty much no excuse not to leverage assets available. So, and again, I think the biggest reminder I'll say is it's not about you. It's about your team. So enabling the team, and over time, yeah, this product document is probably going to be outdated. So you have to refresh it. But again, it's all enabling people you work with to make sure that they're empowered, right? They're enabled. They have full, you use the word autonomy. I love that word. It kind of gives you, an opportunity to give them, do the best work possible, but also there's an element of accountability, right? You cannot keep your delivery team accountable if you yourself haven't set them up for success. So very, very important. But again, I think the other thing is, at the end of the day, it's all about being able to tell a story, like as a PM, we're constantly in a storytelling mode. What are we building? Why is this important? Why build it now? Those are very important things to explain up front, and also make sure we evolve, because what was true 6 months ago may not be true anymore. The market is changing very fast. So if there is any kind of shift in focus in the company, and we all have been through that, it's also very important to explain people why. So transparency is very important to me.
So what would you advise, maybe, to a young person that wants to go into product, and or maybe at the start of his or her career into product development, and wants to become a product leader in a startup, in a scale up, in a big organization, what would be one or two things that they can do
Yeah.
in order to get there?
Well, probably this is where I would say, I would share experience that I wish, somebody shared with me. And again, I've had wonderful mentors, along my career. And definitely the reason I'm here is because there were people that believed in me back in the day more than I believed in myself. But, four things come to mind. So first of all, and again, this is going to be a little bit more for personal thing. You kind of have to ask yourself, do you want to be more of a generalist, or you do want to be a little bit more focused? I think it's very important still to know the market you're serving as a PM. It might be harder if you're a brand new PM, but if you're already PM in the industry, I think it's really important to really understand the market, right? What are the trends? If you are in biohealth versus consumer versus fintech versus supply chain. So at least try to identify what it is that you want to serve. And then if you're already in the industry that you're interested in, try to go deeper. And the reason I say that is because the better you know the market and your customer, the better you are at identifying and discovering those, unmet, gaps and really disrupting it, right? If you're brand new, it's hard, but I would say at least pick something, because actually there is a lot of, cross pollination. I myself have worked on, bio and health tech and precision health, and worked on data and worked on insurance. And what's actually it's been hard for me. So I would say, like, not, I wish I knew this, 15 years ago. I would have found a market and would stay with it. But again, that's more personal. I also think me going from market to market also made me learn. And also, by being unfamiliar, unfamiliar at something, it humbled me and also helped me develop skills to kind of like thrive and kind of make up for the losses. So actually, yeah, try to know the market, the pain points, develop your customer obsession, try to develop that muscle of really understanding the customer and be very specific. Like, talk to your customers. That's very important. Winning products are all backed by, customer experience and customer feedback. So I'd say that's number one. Second is try to surround yourself with people that are different than you. I actually found that very helpful. And again, I'm a pretty, convivial person. So I tend to, build relationships, both in my professional and personal world rather easily. But that wasn't always the case. Actually, I used to be very shy. And I would say the biggest thing that helped me is learning from others, especially from people that are different than me. So when I say different, we're talking about everything. If you're younger, surround yourself with people that are more experienced. If you are outgoing, go build relationship with somebody who's more on the introverted and shy side. Don't underestimate the value of quiet leadership, right? If you're in one function, try to surround yourself with people in others, right? So on the psychological, on that, conversational. And again, if you're like a visual learner, actually try to explain something to somebody who is more of an auditory learner, or somebody who is very data driven, because that will help you communicate and be a good communicator to everybody, right? And just try to be a sponge. Like, advice I always give is, like, if you ever go to all hands, or if you go to a team meeting and you're new and somebody strikes you as like passionate and interesting, talk to them. Just say, hey, can I buy you a cup of coffee for 15 minutes of your time? Even if you get a rejection, you will not be rejected. If you were to ask 10 people, at least 2 or 3 will say yes. And those are your good lessons. Those are people to get, good lessons from. And then do the same. When you see somebody come in who is a little shy and a little bit new, you go and be that teacher that you wish you had and kind of offer. So I truly believe that, right? And then last but not least, like, experience is the best teacher, right? So if you really want to learn something, just do it. And, no matter how big the company, where you're working is, there's probably a lot of loose ends, and you have to wonder, well, whose job it is. And like I said, if you have to wonder whose job it is, yours. Right? So step in, right? Like, for example, when you're launching your product, there's a lot of actions, a lot of tasks. The marketing team, no matter how big it is, is probably going to be struggling. Help out on creating the training material or talking to your engineering team to create, launch playbooks. So be more involved, and especially in areas that are new to you. If you're more on the technical side, get involved with sales and marketing. If you're more on the outbound side, get involved with technical. It will help you be 360. And I think over time, we're kind of like moving into these like strict organizational boundaries into being more of like super PM, where you can really do anything. You can actually launch your product now. You can create a prototype on your own, before you even, validate it. So there's a lot of opportunities out there, but that means you need to know what questions to ask. And the way to do that is, by learning and taking those opportunities up front. That's
So
my
I know that you're also consulting for different companies, different projects. Maybe some of them startups, maybe some of them not. I'm curious, and I'm thinking everyone wants to know. It's a period with a lot of movements in any direction, and a lot of technology that is manifesting itself. Um, what would the company should focus on in this direction of product? Given the technological landscape, the market landscape, and so on, what would be one or two directions to focus on? And yeah,
Yeah, that's a hard question, frankly, because again, a lot depends on where the company is and its trajectory and, how seasoned it is, how big it is. But just in general, you kind of want to figure out your moat. And the moat is, that differentiation that is hard to replicate. So when I advise, the biggest trend that I see in companies I advise, and again, this is in different sectors because I advise for bio and health as well as, fintech companies. I also advise for, this company that specializes in, for example, loans. They want to do too much, right? So our appetite is rather big, but the team size and also time is really scarce. So what I suggest is try to be very focused and just do less but better. So try to identify your moat and then go in. Because when you launch and if it's done well, even if that moat itself is not what's going to set you apart from the rest, you will start learning a lot just by having those, conversations. So I think it was Jeff Bezos that said, like, well, if you launch something and you're not at least embarrassed, you launch too late. Well, yes and no. You can stretch that definition too much. You still have to, again, the expectations are pretty high right now. And again, because the tooling available and, previously inaccessible learnings is so accessible right now, people have high expectations. So you cannot underwhelm your customers. But at least, like I said, if you launch a mode and you're learning from it, that is a conversation starter, right? So, and I think again, everybody's right now talking of AI, but people know they need to be AI driven, AI informed. But I think people are still trying to figure out where exactly it is, right? That how exactly is AI going to help? Or if you look at like, oh, when the cloud came out, right? Or when, the web came out, like we've been through this before, right? And as a humanity, we usually underestimate, the impact short term and, globally, of course, how much it's going to change, right? But I would say overall, the trend is right now to be maybe more from, retrieval, to go away from retrieval into more instructional, into more autonomous. So there's, I think right now there's a trend to go into creating more autonomous experiences and more interactive experiences. So if you look at the products you use right now, digital products, they probably have selection of features and you use them or not. I think the trend right now is to make them more collaborative and more personalized, right? So where you can really have that interactive experience, get the dashboard at a glance, get some kind of, data or answers at a glance. So that's where it's going. So again, it's too early to say, but in general, what I advise the trends I'm seeing in companies, I advise is they try to do too much, right? So zooming in, I would say, is really important. And the second thing is just always up leveling. A lot of times, our scarcest resources is the people. So making sure they really are empowered to do the job they were hired to do by making sure that all the functions are properly, documented, the roles and responsibilities are clear communicated, and just having, clarity of thought around expectations. That's really important. When startups fail, a lot of it is because, well, they run out of time and money. And the reason for that is just because they try to do too much. And, that's something they learn too late.
Could also AI help the product function within the organization? I mean, maybe accelerate some of the product team activities, or some of the product team outcomes or inputs or processes, or how do you look at this?
Yeah, so I definitely think so. So I think right now, the biggest advantage of AI that I see right now is back in the day where it was still a little bit more waterfall. Even if you had a concept, you worked with a designer, you had to click through Figma prototype, then the designer would explain it to the engineering team, then they would build it, front end would talk to back end. Of course, let's not forget infrastructure. Now, I think tools like Cursor or Replit or Build or Lovable, you can literally build a prototype within minutes. Right. I think PMs are now more and more enabled to create that, very abstract idea and create something more tangible that they can actually go ahead and explain the concept to their organization. So I think that's a very important way for us where AI can step in and help. So you're kind of going from more dependence to being completely independent. But again, the hard part is still knowing what questions to ask, what problem to solve, right? And the market selection, I think, is still going to be a very difficult, place for us,
Hmm.
meaning that where do we want to play? Where do we want to innovate? And I think second thing is the value proposition, right? As PMs, we probably can be better at figuring out what value proposition just because we will be able to be more accelerated in identifying those features and building them. And like right now, it literally is with build. I used build the other day. I was able to create something instantly compared to, having to rely on designers and do this, and not to discount their value. Again, they will also be better in this as well. And I think the other thing to keep in mind is with these AI tools now, everybody can be PM. People that are on a support team that actually encounter problems all the time, or commercial teams that talk to customers, now they can also innovate. And I think PM as a discipline is going to be more encompassing and more accessible to everybody else, right? So definitely there's going to be acceleration on the building side. And I think the resource allocation, that's another one, it's going to be cheaper and faster. Right.
Hmm.
But again, the hard part is going to be there's going to be more players, and you also need to be very focused on what you want to do and then doing it well. So
So
those are
the
the trends I'm seeing.
the strategic part of the PM role will become even maybe more important and harder, given the market landscape. But on the other hand, bringing ideas to customers quicker, or bringing ideas to life quicker, it will be accelerated. And
That's right. So yeah, I would say entrepreneurial pursuits are going to be more accessible. They'll be more dynamic. They'll be more rapid, meaning that it will be faster to fail, which is actually what you want, right? And then along the way, not only is it going to be more accessible, I think the quality is going to go up. I think people's expectations will also go up. And also, again, you'll be able to spend less resources to get results. So you can now allocate those resources in more intelligent ways. So those, again, my guesses, but we shall see.
hmm. That seems like an exciting new world. I'm curious where the world will get in 10 years from now. Apparently, everything accelerates. So yeah, how do you look at this 10 years horizon?
Yeah, well,
Uh,
hard to tell, but if I
Totally different than we are today, or
I think, like I said, it's not going to replace, the creativity and, being human and being strategic. I think, if anything, it's going to assist us, right? And it's going to be more important to know what questions to ask rather than knowing the answer. Somebody
Mm.
reminded me that, back when Google came out, the teachers didn't allow kids to use Google to look up answers. They would still had to go to the library. Now we know, thankfully, that's not the case now. I kind of see some of it. So with AI, for example, I have teenagers in high school and they do get assignments that say, do not use AI. You will automatically get an F. But yet, if you were to go to a Ivy League school, you actually have dedicated courses to use AI. So I don't think AI is going to necessarily replace product. It's going to accelerate it. So few things that I see is that, like I said, we talked about it, it's going to be a more accessible field, right? AI will not replace creativity, but it will be very important to know, what questions to ask, right? And then you'll be able to, get direction from there. And again, it's not going to replace our humanity, or just like everything that makes us us. But few things that I see is there's going to be more, several interesting opportunities that I predict. So first of all, modalities. So currently, it's mostly text based, right? But it will be more visual and it will be more possibly auditory, and you'll be able to supplement. Imagine that if you can supplement something with a working prototype and that experiential aspect, I think that's going to help us, be better in how we do things. So again, modality is going to advance. Maybe even experientially and tactically. That's exciting too. It's going to be more collaborative, right? So I also see that, if every company has that very focused, AI agent, imagine connecting them together. So products are not just standalone, but it really is a connected ecosystem and we can learn from each other and kind of accumulate, benefits that way. And again, it's going to go from retrieval to instructions to maybe being more autonomous rather than like pulling for information. We can also instruct it to do something with information, or better yet, when it's autonomous, can actually anticipate and do things. Now, that's hard, but I think that's the direction where we're going, so we can spend our days better and more efficiently. I also think we shouldn't discount the, aspects of security and safety, both ethically and also making sure that, there's less hallucination, there's more truthfulness. And I know there's a lot of efforts in it. And again, we'll probably see an intersection of two vectors. One is the trends around, better LLMs and better models. And then another one is products using those LLMs. So you will see, intersection of those. And again, building a product on top of an LLM is hard, right? But it's only through trial and error. And by, using it collaboratively in a connected ecosystem, we'll be able to reap the benefits. So those are just few things that I'm seeing, in our future. Again, more connected, more collaborative experiences and something more collaborative.
Wow. Looking forward to see the future unfolding in front of us.
Right.
Well, Olga, we're at the end of our interview. Thank you so much for taking the time.
Thank you. Thank you so much. I hope this was useful. And yes, if anybody has any questions, I'm on LinkedIn and always happy to answer whatever follow-up questions.